The Prime Minister today, of course, sounded very cool today on moving quarantine hotels into the country.
When there are specific proposals, and we're working through one in Toowoomba at the moment, we're not working through, and we've looked at the Gladstone option and we don't believe that is a sensible thing to do. There wasn't a lot of detail on that, but the broader risks were not ones that we thought were ones that economically or particularly from a health point of view could be appropriately covered off. But the Toowoomba option we're looking at is a supplementary capacity, and writing back to the Queensland Premier today about that.
He has had 3 briefings on the Halton review. The Halton review makes the clear recommendation that the Commonwealth should set up a national quarantine facility.
I spoke a short while ago to Sky News political reporter Trudy McIntosh. Trudy McIntosh, thank you so much indeed for your time. Why is the Prime Minister not so keen on moving the quarantine hotels into the bush?
Andrew, this centres around advice that the Prime Minister's been given. Late last year, Jane Halton, one of the top bureaucrats in Canberra, conducted this broad review of the nation's hotel quarantine system, and it's my understanding that she personally advised the Prime Minister that basically the only dedicated facility that would be good to establish a regional sort of quarantine system is Howard Springs in the Northern Territory. The number of reasons why that's the case, she believes that's the only facility that can really be stood up to a big capacity. That's because it's close to the Darwin airport. It's close to the big hospital with ICU capacity. They have a dedicated surge workforce, and also that Howard Springs itself, the rooms don't share aircon, which is growing to be an issue with the concern that there is now airborne transmission taking place in these big high-rise hotels. So that's part of the reason that explains why there is a reluctance to stand up other sort of mining camp facilities in regional areas of the country. There's a whole series of reasons that the government's reluctant, but as you can see, Labor making the case that they believe that's basically just the Prime Minister fobbing this off, that if he had the political will, he could make this happen. You could solve all of those issues in the regions to try and mitigate the risk that we are seeming to start seeing now in these capital cities.
Well, the cost of closing down the whole city seems to me worth a big investment in doing this, but I guess it all depends on how many times you think we will have to do that. So Labor's keen on that. It seems that Christina Keneally thinks this is an issue that she could hurt the government on. This is one of the rare points of difference between the two sides.
Yeah, this is certainly an issue that Labor believes that is a weak spot for the government. They believe that they have been sitting on the Halton review essentially and abdicating the responsibility for quarantine to the state premiers. This will be an issue that we do see at National Cabinet tomorrow as well, Andrew. Some of the premiers again speaking out today saying there needs to be a rethink potentially of hotel quarantine if we're going to continue to see leaks of these strains into quarantine workers, potentially into the community then, and this broad spread and the issue of lockdowns, that they may need to rethink this whole sort of process.
Now, other news today, the Prime Minister had a conversation with new US President Joe Biden.
As he said to me again today, he sees the Australia-US relationship as providing the anchor for peace and security in our region, and that is true. We share that view. In terms of our relations between Australia and the United States, there's nothing to fix there, only things to build on.
What did you take out of that?
I think it's interesting, Andrew, that it's taken 2 weeks since inauguration to actually get this phone call. If you look at the list of leaders who went ahead of Scott Morrison, it's interesting to see that maybe Australia isn't necessarily the priority that it once was. You'll recall that Donald Trump actually called the then Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull much earlier than this. Does this signal that the Biden administration's focus isn't necessarily in our region? I'd also point out there was an interesting point raised here really by Scott Morrison in the press conference today. He says that he believes Joe Biden is going to be more nuanced when it comes to his language on China compared to Donald Trump. But will this lead to a thaw in the frosty relationship we see with Beijing and Canberra, Andrew? Remains to be seen, really.
Absolutely. I wouldn't count anything very soon. And lastly, good news on the vaccine front. We're buying millions more.
Yeah, 10 million more doses of Pfizer coming our way. That actually doubles the number of Pfizer doses that will be in place. We're now also expecting to see the approval of the AstraZeneca jab as well. That's expected to come in the coming weeks. And that essentially we could be seeing vaccines from the end of this month, and then the AstraZeneca jab with that approval in place likely to begin from early next month. So some good news: within weeks we could be seeing the first COVID vaccines rolled out here in Australia.
Well, not before time. Trudy McIntosh, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.